Welcome back to Salam Media. This hour of news and views is sponsored by African Muslims Agency. African Muslims Agency, a beacon of hope to communities for over 35 years in Africa and beyond. In a bit, we'll be chatting to Tessa Dooms. She's currently on standby. She's joining us via the telephone. She's a political analyst, sociologist, development practitioner, activist, and director at the Rivonia Circle. And the topic that we'll be touching on is Gauteng cabinet announcement postponement yesterday. I think we all thought that after national cabinet was announced, that Gauteng would follow suit after the KZN, did it first, and then national came after a long-awaited, announcement by the president. And also, we thought right after that maybe Gauteng would follow suit, but that wasn't the case. This is the second time that the announcement had to be postponed, and I think it was yesterday. I think as media practitioners and the citizens of Gauteng waited with bated breaths for Gauteng Premier Panyaza Lesufi's 10-member provincial cabinet, which was derailed at the 11th hour. And this is the second time the announcement had to be postponed. Last week, a planned event by Lesufi to announce his executive was also abruptly cancelled, and with the premier saying negotiators had requested more time. The delays in announcing the Gauteng Provincial Government of Unity, GPU, they coined it, mirror weeks of uncertainty that threatened to derail the Government of National Unity as the DA and ANC slugged it out over ministerial positions. And joining us over the phone right now is Tessa Dooms. She's a political analyst, sociologist, development practitioner, activist, and director at the Rivonia Circle. Tessa, thank you so much for joining us and for giving us your time.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
I think, we all thought that after national cabinet was announced, we would see, the Gauteng cabinet also mirroring in a way national cabinet, but this wasn't the case. At the 11th hour, Panyaza Lesufi coming out and saying, we are postponing, asking for more time. What do you think this can be attributed to? Why the delay for Gauteng provincial cabinet to be formed?
Well, I think the first thing is the acceptance that we've had that the national and provincial cabinets need to be connected to each other, that negotiations that happen at national should impact on provincial. And this was already a problem right at the beginning when the ANC first announced a government of national unity. We'll remember that the parties that they announced they were talking to were the DA, the IFP, and the NFP. And the NFP didn't have a national seat, but they were talking about a government of national unity negotiation. And that was on the basis that they were, in fact, negotiating KZN. As the premise for having a government of national unity. So it became clear to me that the real purpose of the government of national unity was the ANC trying to salvage its provincial fallout of the election. And I think that there's a problem in that, inherent in that, because that means we're not negotiating and we're not forming governments at provincial level based solely on the outcome of those provinces. We're not doing it based on the priorities or the policy issues of those provinces or even the local dynamics. We're allowing for a national negotiation for positions to be the determining factor on how we form governments elsewhere. Each of the provinces and national actually constitute their election. And so when parties fall into this idea that they can barter for one election on the basis of the other, I mean, the DA is even talking about municipal shifts, and we're seeing now that eThekwini and other places in KZN have been affected by this at a municipal level. This just speaks of a politics that is based on horse trading and positions and patronage and nothing else. And I think all parties involved really should be called to order for it, because this means that the voters are being taken for a ride.
And, if there's one thing that really stood out for me, was yesterday in a briefing, ANC Provincial Executive Committee member Lebogang Maile was saying the DA wants to impose which political parties the ANC must work with. He also, said that they have concluded agreements with other parties, and it's only the DA that's behaving like a spoiled brat. I want to touch on the DA, and I think this was also the case when there were negotiations for the government of national unity, that there's this arrogance that they are coming with, and a very heavy-handedness when it comes to their demands. Could this potentially see a breakdown of the government of provincial unity? And what would that look like? And could it in any way affect what's happening nationally?
Well, the DA is doing itself no favors reputationally. It has a history of having other parties as coalition governments across the country say that the DA is hard to work with. And we've seen DA coalition governments fall apart at a whim around the DA's inability to be flexible or to be accommodating. In this instance, what we are seeing is the DA thinking that it can set the tone for all negotiations at the expense of other parties. And that assumes that the DA has a disproportionate amount of power. But when you look at the results, even at national level, if you consider the entirety of the picture, it is not necessarily the only game in town in terms of the ability to form a coalition outright with the ANC involved. And I think that that's what really should stand out first. If the DA was as powerful as it is, it would be able to form coalitions without the ANC. It cannot do that. So the disproportionate importance that the DA has given itself is really a function of a few things. One is the power that it's garnering outside of the pure political outcomes. And so, for example, of business, of the DA-ANC coalition, that has given the DA a disproportionate amount of power. We can also think about factors like the internal dynamics of the ANC universe, the discord between the MK party and the ANC, or the EFF and the ANC. The DA is actually benefiting of extra electoral power. And I think that if the DA was as powerful as it claims to be, and as it's been posturing to be in this election, then it would be the party with the highest percentage, and it would be a party that can form governments outside of the ANC. The fact that it can't do that means that the DA does need to come into these negotiations with a lot more good faith and a lot more reasonable sense of wanting to negotiate. Because I think everybody's given the DA a lot higher level of benefit of the doubt in terms of operating in good faith and not making outrageous demands. That's kind of been our posture, as the commentariat. But when you see that the DA has been the only party so far that's gone into the government of national unity and then threatened to walk away, and that creates a bad faith negotiation, because it says that we don't even know what principles this is based on other than positions that the DA can say all at once that this is not based on positions, but they are yet to show us anything in their negotiating that has been about something other than positions.
Speaking of positions, the DA came out and said, the ANC was offering them one MEC position, and later said, well, they can only give them two. Well, the DA itself is demanding that they get at least six, and give one or two positions to the smaller parties. Because, well, they're bringing in 27% of the votes. Is this fair, or is this again the DA, coming in with their heavy-handedness and outrageous demands? 27% of the votes is a big number, taking into context.
Well, for all intents and purposes, we are hearing the DA's version of events, but we're not hearing the full picture. I think, and it's been one of the problems in the entirety of this negotiation period, is that political parties across the board, again, including the ANC, have used the media as a negotiating platform and a negotiating tool. And again, have done so in bad faith. Because it has not been about a united front from the different parties coming into this, saying this is where the negotiations are at. Or in the case of national, or even in this case, where the political head, in the national case, the president, for example, giving an update on the broad negotiations would be far better than having leaked letters here and different parties all on their own. There has been a lack of leadership in these negotiations. There has been a lot of using of the media and the public for information we can't even verify. We can't verify what they're saying is right or wrong. I think what clearly has been missing in these negotiations is leadership, has been unity. The parties talk about having a statement of intent that binds them in the government of national unity, yet we haven't even heard that these parties have actually all sat around the table together. The government of national unity has not sat as a group of parties together to negotiate together. This has all been based on bilaterals and all been based on different parties posturing. I think that if we are to take seriously that there is any kind of coalition that is being formed across the parties, we should actually see these parties standing together, sitting together, coming to the media together, coming to society as a collective front. Right now, all it seems like is that we as the public are being used for other people's political ends without any kind of good faith or transparency that we can genuinely depend on.
And just how concerned should the citizens of Gauteng and to a certain level of the country? I mean, we've seen some sort of coalitions playing themselves out at municipalities and metros, and those have broken down and failed dramatically. Now we're at a provincial level before even cabinet is formed. We're seeing such rhetoric and such discontent with each other from these political parties concerned. Should we be concerned that once this cabinet is being formed and ultimately we have this GPU in place, is it really going to work? Seeing just before it even starts, there seems to be a lot of bickering and a lot of uneasiness around each other from the political parties concerned.
I'm actually going to make an example that's a contemporary example, right, of the Northern Cape. The Northern Cape is under coalition government as we speak. The ANC and the FF Plus have gone into a coalition. We have not, since that coalition agreement has been signed, we've not heard one talk about that coalition falling apart, no threats, no questions about, whether or not they've made the right decisions or the wrong decisions. And I say that knowing that, of course, it's a two-party coalition with the FF Plus having a very small percentage. But the truth is the FF Plus could be displaced any day, right? It's such a small percentage that they have that even another a one-seat party or two-seat party could displace them. But the point I'm trying to make is that if you have coalitions that are actually formed, number one, in good faith, and number two, on the basis of things that are much greater than just jockeying for positions, then you can create more stable governments. And in fact, the DA has got a history of this in the Western Cape. The DA and the ANC formed one of the first major coalitions in the Western Cape that held together. And it held together because they found ways to operate that were far more inclusive. The ways in which these negotiations are playing themselves out right now really don't bode well for all of us. I think, again, the thing that has been most alarming for me is the ways in which there's been a tone of threat rather than of compromise in the way these negotiations have gone on. We've watched antagonistic negotiations and negotiations that I really think, once you're talking about national government being contingent on Gauteng or Gauteng being contingent on national, all of these things just don't speak to the idea that what's being put on the table here, coalitions that are being formed around a common agenda, a common purpose, and in a way that we can hold accountable as the public. Even the statement of intent is not a document that we can hold anybody accountable to. There's nothing in that document that as a public, we can look at this and say, this is the basis of the government is formed, that we have some sort of input on. Because it's not being based on what's good for the public. It is based on what's good for the parties and based on the positions that they want, and nothing more at this point.
I think we're going to leave it there. Tessa, thank you so much for your insights. And I'm sure, as the situation unfolds, and we hope that the provincial cabinet does get formed at some stage, we'll definitely be catching up with you. But we're going to leave it here for now. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
That was Tessa Dooms Political Analyst, Sociologist, and Development Practitioner, Activist, and Director of the Rivonia Circle, just giving us insight on her thoughts on the failure, essentially, of the formation of the government of Gauteng. We've been waiting. We'll continue to wait. We've waited for the president, and now we wait for Panyaza Lesufi to give us his government, his 10-member provincial cabinet, because, well, time is running out. Gauteng needs to work. This is the economic hub of the country. Gauteng essentially could be, a microcosmic of what South Africa is. And at some point, that announcement does need to happen, and all the parties involved do need to, come together and work for the greater good of the province. And I think again, what's really standing out for me, and I think it mirrors what we've been seeing at a national level, is the heavy-handedness of the Democratic Alliance, the constant threats that will walk away from the government of provincial unity, the same way that they did with the government of national unity. This is as if the ANC doesn't have, other options. If the ANC does want, they can go the MK route, they can go the EFF route, because I'm not really sure what the Democratic Alliance is bargaining with at this point, because it seems to me, at least, that they need the ANC quite more than the ANC really does need them looking into this. But maybe they want to mirror what's happening at a national level. I think it will be more seamless and more efficient when what you have at a national level kind of mirrors what you have at a provincial level. But if it's going to come with so much noise, I mean, just reading on what the DA provincial leader Solim Simang said yesterday, essentially just lashing out at the ANC leaders for quote unquote contradicting themselves, adding that what they were saying was complete rubbish. Imagine that, eh? And these are the people that are supposedly, going to be working together for the next 5 years. As a citizen of Gauteng, do you trust and believe that the correct decisions are going to be made? Do you believe that, all that is done at the Gauteng legislature will be for the benefit of you as a citizen? When before it even starts, well, the conversation is, no, you speaking rubbish. No, you are nonsense. No, you were this, you were that. Ish. Yeah, it's going to be really interesting times ahead. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to be having a really interesting interview with, let me just get my bearings right here. We'll be having a really interesting interview with the CEO of Developing Ambitious Resilient Entrepreneurs. That's there. And we'll be speaking to Moni Bayet, who's been in Turkey and made part of that flotilla, which we hoped that would set sail, but unfortunately didn't. So we'll be chatting to her about that part and also her campaign, where she planned to sue around 10,000 menstrual cups for the women in Gaza. That's the 10,000 menstrual cups campaign for the women of Gaza. So it's going to be a really, really interesting conversation with her, just to get her thoughts about the flotilla, it not setting sail, and this really, really amazing campaign that she has going on. All that and more after this.